You've never felt safe underground. Of course, when you became an adult, you had to stop running up the stairs to get out of the basement. You had to stop asking someone to come with you just in case when you had to grab something from storage. But God, you wished it was acceptable for adults to just admit when something scared them. And being underground always scared you. It wasn't just the dark. Dark places above ground never got to you. It was being inside the earth itself. It wasn't right. But when you finally picked out that forever home that you'd earned, the one that you deserved, well, you had to have a wine cellar. Given your new station in life, really, it would be embarrassing if you didn't. You've got a basement too, of course, but this one is finished and dressed up as much as possible to not look like a basement. The wine cellar, though, that's all exposed stone. It feels like a cave, and you hate it, but you learn to live with it. And when your boss is over to your new place for the first time, you keep up a steely facade as you head downstairs to grab a bottle. Your legs shake, but you don't let fear show on your face. You talk to yourself a bit, musing aloud about which bottle to grab and show whatever might be lurking down there that you aren't afraid of it. But when a voice tells you to just grab the Merlot already, you yelp. You know you should turn around to see whoever or whatever it is, but you don't. Instead, you grab the bottle and walk, not run, but walk up the stairs. If your boss saw you running up the stairs afraid of the dark, you'd never live it down. Literally. Whether it's a burglar, a squatter, or some supernatural mole person down there, you'll deal with it later, because you know that whatever it might have planned for you would pale in comparison to what your boss would do to you if you embarrassed yourself in front of him. So you drink, and you talk, and you plot, all the while trying to ignore the creaks beneath your feet. And when your boss finally leaves, you take off your button-up, soaked through with sweat. You grab your gun, and you go downstairs to finally handle the podcast inside your house. By Annie Marie Morgan and Kevin Schrock. With today's episode written by Travis Brown, or as you might know him from Reddit, Grand Theft Motto, and music by Hex System. Season 2, Episode 7, The Hymn of Hard Luck. There were already about a dozen people in the room when I walked in. Walk is a charitable description for the way I half-dragged, half-stumbled through the double doors. We were meeting in an old church hall, the kind of place that played host to bingo and Christmas bazaars since the beginning of time. The crowd was a mix of the bright-eyed and the burned-out. We all milled around, tired souls in a wobbly cluster in front of the craft services table. I took a glazed donut and a drink and found a seat. The metal chairs were as cold as the coffee. 11 of us sat in a rough semicircle, quietly chewing and sipping and watching the hands of the clock drag so slow that they must have been wearing cuffs. The group trended older, though there were a few fresher faces. I made eye contact with a nervous man wearing a new blazer with a t-shirt underneath. He looked familiar, like a mirror I might have met a decade ago. We had similar sharp features, coarse jaws, shaky hands. The two of us even had the same haircut, though he was only starting to go gray at the temples, while I looked like a dirty field with a heavy dusting of snow. I raised my coffee cup in greeting. "Howdy." The man just smiled tightly and nodded. Then he glanced down to study the hall's tile work. I could tell this was his first meeting. He'd loosen up as we went, I was sure of it. Talking about your demons was like diving into cold water. You resisted. Then the shock hit you, but eventually you got used to the temperature, and there was some measure of comfort. Once we were all settled, the familiar scene began. Everyone took turns talking about their week, their past, their successes, and their slips. There was a rhythm in the tragedy, a hymn of hard luck. Here was the inhalation and slow release of old memories, moments swollen with pain and guilt. We each let them free in the room, and they floated like disfigured balloons between us. A shared cord wrapped around all of our necks, and when we spoke, when we opened up, the pressure loosed just a little. Then we could breathe in the good air, lovely oxygen that tasted like the summer sun and promised that tomorrow might be better than yesterday. When it was my turn, I stood up. I made sure to look around the room and make eye contact. I caught the new guy's glance and nodded. He smiled back gingerly. "Hey, my name's Henry, and I'm an alcoholic," I lied. "Hi, Henry," returned the chorus. "It's been a rough month," I said. That part was true. I got on the wagon, fell off the wagon, and then the wagon ran me right over. Some knowing chuckles there. The hymn of hard luck. It was a melody that we all knew, a song to hum on our worst days. I went on to talk about temptation, about loss, about the ache of digging yourself a lonely well in the cold earth of your soul and crawling into the dark. "The water in that well is freezing and it makes you sick," I said, "but it never runs out. It's an easy place to find when you're thirsty. I know the draw of the well, how the stones have their own gravity. One day I want to break its violent orbit. I live for that day. Every morning I wake up hoping that this is that moment, that first day of the rest of my life." "Oh, you'll get there," Jerry said. He was an old-timer, a veteran of the self-waged war and a fixture at these meetings. "We'll all get there," he promised. I nodded and took my seat. The new guy, the one who looked so very much like a younger version of myself, was staring at me. Maybe something I said clicked for him, or maybe our shared resemblance had him thinking about the roads you walk in life and where he might be in a few years. When it was his turn to speak, he was quick and quiet. I don't think he gave his real name, and he was back in his seat in under 20 seconds. But we all welcomed him warmly, the woman sitting next to him giving his shoulder a squeeze. After the meeting, the young man approached me as I topped off my travel mug at the coffee pot. His blue eyes were bloodshot, and I could smell the evergreen bitterness of gin on his breath. A little something to calm his nerves that morning, I guessed. "My name's Matt," he told me, reaching out for a handshake. That wasn't the name he gave the group. We shook. "I just wanted to tell you everything you said about the well, about breaking the orbit, that I get that. It was good to hear someone say it, to put words to the pull I feel each day. Thank you." I smiled. "You're very welcome, Matt." I knew the next part. I was sure of it. A wave of need hit me hard, and I squeezed my travel mug until it felt like my knuckles would slip out of my skin. Following the need was the familiar anger, the impatience. I fought it down and kept a smile carved into my face. Matt glanced around the room and then met my eye. I was wondering if you'd be willing to sponsor me." I pretended to think about it. "Well, that's a heavier order than you might realize, this being your first meeting and all. Are you hungry? We can grab breakfast and talk about it." "I'm not really hungry," Matt said. "To tell you the truth, I haven't had much of an appetite lately." Irritation dancing up my spine. "Well, let's go eat. Hunger has a way of sneaking up on you." Matt hesitated, but nodded. I felt something relax inside of me, a sleeping need that always had one eye open. "I know a quiet diner around the corner," I said. The place was empty, greasy, the sort of diner where they put pies under the glass and the coffee could dissolve aluminum. I ordered food. Matt just asked for tea. We sat and I ate, in silence. "What do you think makes it stick?" Matt asked me when I was halfway done with my eggs. I was having a hard time focusing. The need was banging around my head like a trapped animal, freshly locked in the zoo. I could hear my pulse loudly pumping. Even worse, I could hear Matt's. Under the table, my left hand would clench and unclench. There was a rising anxiety blooming in me. It was familiar, a nervous vibration that tugged at my skin, an impending sense of doom. I knew it was the withdrawal talking, promising, threatening. The shakes would come next. I sat there, staring at Matt, watching him talk, but not listening. His heartbeat sounded like a hammer, driving a nail with every thump. My anxiety kept feeding off of itself, making more and more demands. Suddenly, I felt genuinely afraid. I was trapped with no control. Instead of free will, I was stuck on a train track. Every day I would go to the end of the line and fall off an unfinished bridge. Then the next day I would start the ride all over again. "Henry, are you okay?" I came back to the moment and glanced up at Matt. "Sure," I said, dragging out a smile. "Just thinking. Sorry, did you ask me a question?" Matt tapped his finger against the handle of his coffee mug. "What do you think makes sobriety stick? I just can't, I can't seem to get it to take root, you know? I'll be good, real good and steady for a week or 2 or 3, and then out of nowhere I feel that gravity you talked about, that pull, and it's like a switch flips and I'm on autopilot. I shut out the little voice in my head telling me to stop, begging me." He trailed off. "What's the longest you've been clean?" I asked. "It was last summer. I made it 59 days, Matt sighed. "I got through the 4th of July and a camping trip in August. It was just some random bullshit Tuesday afternoon that got me. You?" I pushed my eggs away. My best stretch was 18 months and 11 days. Funny enough, it was a Tuesday afternoon that got me as well. Nothing special that day. I was in a blue mood, I suppose, and tired. I remember the feeling creeping up on me early in the morning. It was like spotting thunderclouds on the horizon. By lunchtime, I was contemplating tying myself to a radiator or breaking my legs, anything to keep me from relapsing. Come dinner time, the numbness crept in, the resignation, and then the bargaining. I would only slip up this once. I'd earned it. I was doing fine. Tomorrow I'd be right back to 18 months and 12 days. And just like that, I crashed back into orbit. Matt was staring down at his cup. It took me a moment to realize there were tears on his cheeks. I felt nauseous, the eggs I'd just eaten threatening to come back up all over the glossy dinner table. Panic nibbled at the edge of my thoughts. I didn't want to live on the rails anymore. "Why is it like this?" Matt asked. "It's like I'm drowning." "What made you want to go to the meeting today?" "I hurt people," Matt said, voice shaking. "People I cared about. One more than the rest, and when she left last month, I knew I couldn't stay the same person I was, the same one I am, but it's hard, Henry. It's so hard to reset myself." "I know," I told him. "I have something that might help. I don't live far away. Do you have a little more time to spare?" "Too much," he replied, smiling sadly. "Nothing but time." I paid our check and we left, dark clouds on the horizon. As we walked down the city sidewalk, I tried to focus on the feeling of the winter sun on my skin. But even though it was lovely and warm for the season, all I could find when I closed my eyes, besides the usual daytime burn, was the pull of a terrible gravity. "Would you like a drink?" I called out from the kitchen. I heard Matt laugh from the living room. More than anything, he admitted. But sure, water would be fine. We were in my apartment, a cozy brownstone I'd lived in for I'm not even sure how many years now. I'd moved in sometime before Matt was born, I'm sure. Probably before his parents and grandparents as well. I poured him a glass of water and pulled the rolled-up sheet of plastic out from a cabinet above the refrigerator. Matt accepted the water with a puzzled look. What's that for? Well, I'm a bit of a germaphobe, and you'd be amazed with how much this helps with cleanup, I said, placing the plastic on the floor between us. I unrolled the thin, clear material. It was a plastic square 6 feet across. When I stood up, I saw Matt's confusion begin to evolve into panic. Why do, he began, the rest of his sentence trapped when my right hand caught his throat. Matt looked surprised. I move awfully quick. He struggled and clawed and wheezed, but I had a grip like a prison gate, and once it was closed, it would only open up on its own time. I did not let him suffer. Matt's windpipe crumpled between my fingers like a styrofoam cup. When I pulled my hand back, it was red and wet. He fell, and I gently steered him to land on the plastic. The room smelled like meat and copper. Matt's mouth was opening and closing, like a fish drowning in air. The hole in his throat prevented him from forming words, but I knew what he was asking. Why me? I knelt down and put a hand on Matt's shoulder. There were tears in my eyes. It's nothing you did, I promised him. And I'm no one to judge you anyway. Part of it, well, it's just bad luck. The rest is because I thought you would understand. I went back into the kitchen to find an empty glass, while Matt bled to death on my floor. Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Podcast Inside Your House. To hear every tale of terror as they're released, subscribe to our show on your podcast app or on YouTube, or follow us on Blue Sky, Facebook, and X. And until next time, don't be afraid to treat yourself this weekend and crack open a cold one, whatever that means to you.